Welcome to the All Hoops podcast. I'm your host, Steve Inman. I'm joined, as always, by co-host and producer to the stars, Chris Brito. It is time for the NBA Finals, where the Dallas Mavericks are going to face off against the Boston Celtics. Chris and I are going to break down the keys to these matchups, as well as discuss the unique path each of these teams used to get here. Before we get to all that, Chris, my friend, it's finals time. One more series to go. How are you?
We're finally here. It's the end of the NBA season. It was a great NBA season. Um, but we still have to talk about these Celtics. And, they've been dominant all season. They dominated through the playoffs. I don't like talking nicely about them, but you got to give them credit for, maintaining that sort of, you know, great play throughout the playoffs. Like they weren't really tested in the way that many other teams have, namely our Knicks. Um, the thing about the Celtics that sort of impresses me is that, they've had Porzingis mostly healthy throughout the season. He didn't play for a lot of the playoffs, but they're going to have him back for the finals, from what I hear. The other thing that makes them sort of impressive is that, Tatum hasn't really played well in these playoffs, yet they really haven't broken a sweat throughout these first three playoff rounds. So maybe, I know for sure the next round, the finals will definitely be the biggest test for them for more reasons than one. They're facing a familiar foe in Kyrie Irving. They're facing maybe the next face of the NBA, which is Luka Doncic. And three, I think both these teams have the power to score a lot. Um, but I do think the Celtics' defense is going to be tested in a way they never have. Um,
Yeah, I think for sure that this series will end up with whoever wins is going to be considered one of the quote unquote the face of the NBA, whether that's Luka in Dallas or Tatum in Boston. And you think, oh, like Tatum hasn't even played that well. Like his numbers in the playoffs, 26 a game, over 10 rebounds, 6 assists on 45% shooting. I mean, the three-pointer has not been there, but
29% from three, though. Yeah.
right, 29% from three. But, he's been pretty good, like pretty good, but he just hasn't been like, we haven't seen that 45-point takeover game that we've seen so many of these spectacular performances, whether it's Anthony Edwards or Luca or Jalen Brunson, and we've not seen that from Tatum. So I'm curious to see how that plays out because if he does have one of those, he's going to have a case going from the 10th best player in the NBA to maybe second, third, or maybe first. So we'll see.
Yeah, and I think it can't be understated how well, obviously, the guys like, Jalen Brown have also been playing. Like he was named the Eastern Conference MVP. I forget what the actual name of that award is. Uh,
I think it's the Larry Bird,
oh, the Larry.
right?
Oh,
Larry Bird.
yeah, sure. But I think Derek White is going to be huge in this series. He's going to likely take, you know, he's going to probably guard Kyrie a lot. Um, and then Porzingis being back is going to present its biggest challenge, like that guys like Gafford, guys like Derek Lively have faced. You know, they haven't really faced a big man. Well, that's not fair. You might say otherwise about Gobert. Um, but I think Porzingis is actually more talent. Is very talented, and I think with the dynamic that the Celtics have, with almost everybody being an offensive option, Porzingis just presents like such a unique threat.
Yeah, I definitely think the Porzingis matchup is going to be probably one of the big keys to the series. I mean, in the history of the NBA Finals, any key guy who's missed a month plus to come back for the finals, there's never really been a situation where that guy plays 25 plus minutes. Like this has never really happened before where you have a guy like this and you say, okay, we're going to need you. Like I don't expect him to be playing 40 minutes a game, but I expect him to play 30 minutes a game. And really, there's never been a situation where that has happened, where a guy is basically missed the entire playoffs, comes back for the finals and performs. And so how that plays out against a center combo in Lively and Gafford, offensively, I have no issues with what Porzingis is going to do. It's defensively. Is he going to be able to get rebounds over those guys? Is he going to be able to, block shots in the paint? How does that play out? And like Luca and Porzingis have kind of always been like, it just didn't work out. We like each other. It just Luca wants to beat him, and Porzingis wants to beat Luca. Like, don't make it seem like that's not the case because that is the case. And
And
those guys can be like, we're okay with each other, but if that's the
yeah,
nicest thing you could say, you want to beat him. And so that matchup is going to be the big one for me.
and I'm surprised that that's the matchup that. Well, I think it makes a lot of sense for in terms of winning and losing. The Kyrie coming back to Boston
Yeah.
element is probably my favorite subplot of this whole finals. Um, he was supposed to sign there when he said he was, then he didn't, then he stepped on, was it Mr. Lucky? I don't know. I don't remember what his name, the leprechaun at the middle
Yeah.
court,
Lucky.
at center court. He stomped on it. You know, Kyrie is one of those guys that he's had like the most incredible renaissance in the last year and a half since he went to Dallas.
It hasn't been a year and a half. Remember, they
Oh,
missed the playoffs last year. Like it was a
no,
disaster.
right.
And it just really it's been a renaissance the last couple months.
Yeah. And they've caught fire. Like they
Yeah.
have one of the best teams since the trade deadline.
Yeah.
Those were some really shrewd moves getting guys like PJ Washington and Gafford. It's just incredible to me that Dallas, like, we didn't really expect them to be here, but here they are. And
No, I mean, Chris,
they
they're a
tanked the
five
year
seed.
before.
Right. Like they missed the playoffs last year. They're a five seed this year. I mean, they're only a couple games out of the play-in, right? And in the history of basketball, it's really just ones, twos, and three seeds that win it all. Like a five seed doesn't win the whole thing. Five seeds don't really even go to the NBA finals. Like there's only been a few instances where that even happens. And yes, one of those instances was last year with the Miami Heat, but this is not a common occurrence. And for Luca and Kyrie to kind of will this team here against a really good Western Conference. Like, where would you have picked them before the playoffs? Like, fifth best odds to come out of the West, six? Like, I would have picked, you know,
Well,
Denver,
here-
Minnesota, Oklahoma
here's
City. I picked the
I think
Clippers to beat them in seven in the first round. So I did not see this coming.
so. I totally expected the Nuggets to be back in the finals.
Yeah,
I
me
thought,
too.
I- you know, I think then I thought the Wolves. I was all in on the Wolves, or maybe we shouldn't root for the Mavs. That way the Mavericks will win. I don't know. The Mavericks have just been really impressive in the way like they have two really great guys who are playmakers, and I think just to give a Knicks segue for a second, and I think that really matters in the playoffs because you need other guys to create, and I think that's where we missed a guy like Julius Randle, just to relieve some of the pressure from Jalen, even though Jalen obviously played amazing. Who knows what our lucks would have been if both those guys were healthy, fully healthy. That being said, sometimes the playoffs is about who's the healthiest and who's playing great at the time of the playoffs. Dallas is a team that was mostly healthy from what I understand.
Yeah, no, they've been healthy.
The
I mean,
Celtics,
Luka's kind of limping around, but he's out there. He's still playing. He's playing at a high
yeah,
level.
and the Celtics, they had Porzingis, but otherwise they've been okay.
So, okay, so Chris, obviously, I talked about Porzingis versus the Mavericks center combo as a key to this series. What other keys to this series do you see? What matchups should be looked at heavily?
I think Drew Holiday is probably going to guard Kyrie a lot. Um, I think the Celtics are probably going to game plan on one guy beating them. They between the both of them, they probably want Luca to beat them. Um, and I think Drew Holiday is probably going to be on Kyrie the most. And I think some combination of Jalen Brown or Tatum will be on Luca. So I think it's just going to be interesting to see how much of Kyrie is limited. But quite frankly, I don't think there's anybody on the Celtics that can guard those two guys. I also expect to see big things out of PJ Washington this series. Um, but the most important thing out of everything is that in order to beat in order to beat the Celtics, the Mavericks need to be super physical with the Celtics. That is their Achilles heel. I think that was why maybe that they were a little bit cautious against playing against the Knicks because of that reason, because of our style. And I think, the Mavericks still lean a little bit more on the finesse side, but they have guys who can get in there and be bodies down low. And Kyrie and Luca have no problem entering the paint. So
Yeah, no, I think those are all great points. I mean, since the PJ Washington trade, Dallas has been the number one defense in the NBA. So like think about that for a second. And then the Celtics have been having an excellent defense all year. So it's two great defenses with multiple guys on each team who can just make and create their own shot. It's going to be a great series, Chris. I'm really excited to see it. We were talking before the show about like this Luca Kyrie backcourt, and we just both kind of said, and we assume that the Luca Kyrie backcourt not only needs to outperform Brown and Tatum, but we expect it to. Is that enough, or do they need other guys to step in? If Luca and Kyrie beat Brown and Tatum during the series, does that mean the Mavs are going to win?
no, I think it's a little bit of having one other role player step up. You forget like the Celtics can also score, so you're gonna need a lot of scoring. You know, sure, Luca and Kyrie can both drop 60 points. I mean, both drop a combination of 60 points or whatever together,
They could also drop 60 points.
but they
We've
can
seen those
also
guys do that before.
those guys could also, I mean, the other guys can also drop a lot of points. So I think role players like PJ Washington, you know, will Derek Lively get enough lobs? Yeah, some combination of that. I just it won't be enough. I think you need the role players to step up. I think for the Celtics, you can't have Tatum shoot as badly as he has, but you really need to get Porzingis going on the scoring end. That's going to be the biggest X factor for me.
I agree. I think Porzingis versus these bigs. I think that's going to be the biggest X factor for me as well. I don't think they're going to be able to stop Gafford and Lively if those guys are healthy. And by stop them, I mean stop them from getting offensive rebounds, stop them from getting defensive rebounds, stop them, from creating second chance opportunities on broken plays where all of a sudden you look and you're like, oh no, Kyrie's wide open in the corner.
Mhm.
And it just creates a lot of offense for Dallas. So, Chris, it's time for prediction time. I'll let you go first. Who is winning the NBA Finals?
I think the Mavericks win 7 games.
Wow. Wow. I want to do it, Chris. I want to do it. I'm going to take the Celtics in seven. I think home court advantage in this series is actually going to be the difference. These are two great home courts. And I think the Celtics, after a couple of years of knocking on the door, they're going to finally bust through this year. And I'm taking Boston. But I think it's going to be a great series. And I think you and I are both kind of rooting a little bit on the Dallas side.
Yeah. That's one way of putting it.
Yeah. All right, Chris. There you have it. It's going to be a great series. Let's get to our final thoughts. A little while ago, Chris, the Pelicans, who had a decision to make, they have another draft pick from the Lakers for the Anthony Davis deal, and they decided they can either pick to swap picks with the Lakers this year, or they can take the Lakers pick next year. With this being a draft that we're not really sure the talent level at the top, the Pelicans elected to wait for next year to take that Laker pick. So Lakers get a pick back. It's going to be 17th overall. Kind of paving the way for Bronny James to be a first round pick with the Lakers. And if not, expect a very unhappy LeBron. So I'm curious to see how that one plays out on draft night.
I think that was a great move by the Pelicans.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, LeBron's gonna get older. Who's to say that this Lakers team doesn't blow everything up this year? This year, you know, it's
Yeah, I mean, if one of those two big guys misses 40 games next year, the Lakers aren't probably making the playoffs. And then that pick's even more valuable in a better draft. You can also
Mhm.
use that in a couple young players and maybe go get a third star next to Ingram and Zion. You could also do that. Like, I feel like this New Orleans team has a lot of really good players that I kind of like, but I think a consolidation trade might make some sense for them. And having a interesting pick next year could help entice a team to move that star to them over somebody else.
Got it. Yeah. Um, yeah, what if the Lakers gonna do with Bronny? Like there's so much buzz about Bronny Jr. Like I totally get that he's LeBron's son, and that itself obviously deserves some attention, but there's been a lot of attention on where Bronny James might go, who he's having workouts with,
who he's not having workouts with.
not
It's
having
been it's been crazy. And if I'm the Lakers, I really need to hit on this pick. Like I really need to find a guy who can be a role player, impact player right now, especially after missing on guys like Jaime Jaquez last year. Padinsky with the Warriors, like those guys went right after the Laker pick. And
yeah.
so they really need to not screw this one up and to take Bronny James, who whatever you think of him, it's clear he's not ready for the NBA yet, and he's not going to be able to impact winning at a high level next season, most likely. And so to have to be kind of forced to take him, it's a tough position for the Lakers because you really can't say no.
I don't envy them at all.
No. All right, Chris, anything else before we wrap up the show?
No, I'm just excited to see how this NBA season ends. It's been a great season, as I mentioned at the top. I think we have a very worthy NBA Finals for all the NBA fans out there, and I can't wait to see what happens.
All right, that's going to do it for us here on the All Hoops podcast. Thank you for watching on YouTube, listening on Apple and Spotify. We'll be back in the next couple of weeks to talk about the results of the NBA Finals. Then we got the draft coming up. We got free agency, a lot in store. The best time of the year of the NBA season.